Senate estimates has just exposed Australia's biggest $80 billion housing fraud inquiry launch. If you ever wanted any more reason to withdraw your consent from them and withdraw your taxes, because you certainly have taxation without representation. In fact, what you have is taxation and molestation. They're molesting your life. It's theft, nothing but absolute. Just watch this. This is nuts. That's it. Right. At this point, I'm near ready to tell housing to stick their rent up their ass and say, kick me out if you can. I know, they'll just send the cops. They'll just send the jackboots. But I am telling you, at some point, when I bring everything, because I'm building a wicked dossier. I'm building all sorts. People have got no idea what I'm up to. You're starting to figure it out now, I think. At some point, what I'm hoping to do, what I'm trying to do, is to ensure that everybody owns what they have, what they hold. If you hold it, you own it. Don't let anyone take it from you. You've paid for it, you own it. They're taking all our minerals and resources. Yeah, come back here. Right? You hold it, and you've paid money for it, you own it. If you have worked for it, you own it. If you paid a lot of money in taxes over the years, you own it. I don't care. Call me self-entitled if you like. I don't want your stuff. I just want what's mine. I paid for it, I own it. How have you paid for it? 1, your royal estate. 2, are you getting any royalty returns on the minerals and resources that are being raped out of this country by foreign interests who lobby the government to pull this bullshit? Just think, 80 billion with a B. A lot of people don't realise just how much money that is. 80 billion. That's 80 million.
The government has just been grilled in the Senate over housing, and what came out should make every Aussie furious.
In case you missed it, this is what we've delivered already in 2026.
That's why nobody takes them seriously on the economy anymore.
We're getting negative growth projected. It's not good, is it?
It's not solving a supply problem.
I think people are only going to get angrier in this country if they're gaslit into thinking that the economy is okay.
Has anyone been fired for wasting $96 million of taxpayer money?
We are actually in a really good position.
Hey,
Also, before this gets started, think about what happened in America, right, with US AID. We've got foreign AID. This is the same gameplay, right? What happened with Doge? Your saviour is going to fuck you over. Worse than this. I'm telling you now. Because your saviour's in bed with the same bastards. And if they go digital, which is what they want, you're done.
hey guys, it's Scott here, and I want you to understand something, because this isn't political theatre, and it's not some routine parliamentary noise. What happened in the Senate this week you need to know about, and it was an inquiry that ripped straight through the government's housing narrative, and it has exposed things that have never been said this clearly, this publicly, or this bluntly before. For years we've been told the same story, that the government is spending billions, that there's a plan, that housing supply is being fixed, that affordability is going to be tackled. And then, in this Senate hearing, all of that got put under the microscope. And when the questions started coming, the answers did not appear. What you saw instead was evasion, reductions, documents hidden from the Senate, and an agency that couldn't even explain how many homes it had actually delivered. And this isn't some fringe committee. This was a formal Senate inquiry into Housing Australia, the agency responsible for fixing the housing crisis. The same agency the government keeps pointing to every time house prices rise and rents explode. By the end of this hearing, it became painfully clear that the problem isn't just that housing is broken. It's that the people in charge of fixing it don't appear to know what they're doing, don't want to be transparent, and in some cases are actively making things worse. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through what was revealed in the Senate in plain English. I'll explain how the government is spending tens of billions, why fewer homes are being built, how they're competing against Aussies in the housing market, and why first home buyers and renters are being squeezed harder than ever. Because once you see how all of this fits together, you actually cannot unsee it. Now, if you want property and the economy explained without spin, subscribe and hit the bell. I do these videos every single day and I do all the research so that you don't have to do it. Okay, so since being elected, the government has committed around $80 billion to housing.
Performance of the agency that is charged with the expending the government's funds on behalf of the taxpayers, I think requires serious investigation. The ministers of the Albanese government regularly brag about how much money they're spending on housing. Now, according to my EFO documents, it is now up to $80 billion.
That is taxpayer money, your money. And with that kind of money on the table, you would expect two things to be true. You would expect actual housing supply to be rising, and you would expect the government to be able to clearly tell you what you got for your money. This is not what happened in this Senate hearing.
See what I mean? This is what I mean. See what I mean? People on benefits, the money doesn't come from the taxpayer, it comes direct from the RBA, through the government, funneled to us, funneled back into rackets like Homes Tasmania, which is Housing Choices CEOs are using Homes Tasmania to milk us dry, to destroy our housing market, the public housing, which they call social housing now. Yeah, I see a lot of benefits in socialism, but it has to be the people's socialism, not the government's communism. That's the difference. Communism is for the government, socialism is for the people. Right? So this looking down, pointing down at people, calling them self-entitled, fucking do your homework. Self-entitlement's up that way. I don't mean you, Christ. I mean, I'm going at an angle. Right? I'll point that way. That's where Housing Choices is. That way. Queen Street in Melbourne. With the CEOs that we're not allowed to talk to. We're not allowed to talk to the managers of Housing Choices. The property managers can't evict anyone. Here's a racket. Property managers can't evict anybody because Homes Tasmania, who apparently own the homes that Housing Choices are managing, also fund the tenants union of Tasmania. And you'll find it'll be the same in your state. It's a bureaucratic racket. They're racketeering. They're all looking after each other, and it's just funneling public funds all into the public housing market, into the CEOs of Housing Choices, into the tenants union, which is a bureaucratic thing. It's not lawyers. It's a bureaucracy. Right? It's supposed to be a landlord watchdog, like a tenancy watchdog. The only thing they're guarding is the money that they're ripping out of it.
Because when senators pushed for the most basic accountability question, how many homes has Housing Australia actually delivered, the answer was basically a fog. It was vague, it was evasive, and it was, we'll take it on notice. And I want you to sit with that for a moment, because this is the agency that keeps getting held up as the government's big solution to the housing crisis. So if it didn't already boil your blood that they couldn't give Aussies a clear number on delivery, this next part will. Instead of building new housing supply at scale, Housing Australia has been buying existing properties, including off-the-plan homes. Homes that were going to be sold to everyday Aussies trying to enter the market. Homes that were meant to be someone's first shot at getting out of the rent trap. And I don't mean buying in some small harmless way. I mean the government is literally stepping into the market with taxpayer money and competing against the same Aussies they claim they are trying to help. Let me make this real. I know a developer who had a project lined up in the outer suburbs. Hundreds of new houses planned, aimed at first home buyers, priced roughly in that 700 to 800k range. These were not luxury homes. This is the kind of product families stretch for, the kind of product that gives people a chance. And right as those homes were about to be sold, the government came in and outbid everyone. This is madness. So imagine you're a first home buyer. You've saved, you've cut spending, you're trying to get a foot in the door, you show up thinking you're competing with other buyers, investors, banker mum and dad, people who already have equity. There's already a lot of competition there for you. And then the government, your government, turns up and basically says, no, we will buy these instead of you.
And then, yeah, like you said, Housing Australia is like Homes Tasmania, Homes Victoria, Homes New South Wales, Homes Queensland. They might have slightly varying names, but that's who they are. And they're using taxpayers' money to put people in these homes, and all of Centrelink payments. Like I'm paying basically $700 a fortnight for a 70-year-old house, and it ain't great. Let me tell you, can't get anything repaired. Look at me inverter. They keep calling it a heat pump. It's not a heat pump. It's a damn inverter. Heat pumps don't have air conditioning. It's a compromise of the two. It costs a fortune to run and does nothing. Aurora's, they're making a mozza out of it. Out of that thing. That cost me, just for 3 months, through winter, cost me about $1,300 to run that thing. For 3 months. And we're still sitting around with hot water bottles and blankets. So, straight from Centrelink, I don't see it. I don't go and pay the rent. Boom, straight to Housing Choices. $330 a week. And we're self-entitled? Hello? They're getting an entire payment as me as a single full-time parent. They take an entire week's payment. So I live for a fortnight on 1 week's payment, me and the 2 kids. Thank God I've got the nous to grow some food and run some chickens.
You know why this is so infuriating.
Thank God I've got a backyard just big enough to do it.
Because they can dress it up however they want, but the effect is very obvious. Instead of increasing supply, they're taking stock that would have been available to the public and absorbing it using taxpayer money, so they can later point to a headline and say, look, we're doing housing. That's not building supply. That's reshuffling stock and calling it a solution. And if you want the darkest part of all of this, when the government outbids the market, it doesn't just lock you out. It pushes the price up. It tells the developer, don't worry about affordability because we'll pay whatever it takes. We've got taxpayer money here. It's not our money. We didn't work for it. We collected it. And once that becomes the behavior, what do you think happens to prices across the whole market? They climb. So the same government that says it is fixing affordability is actively doing something that can make affordability worse. Now let's take that scandal and let's layer it on top of what they're spending and how they're spending it and why it's getting even uglier. Now, according to the documents raised in the Senate, the government is on track to spend around $80 billion on housing since coming to power. That is nation-shaping money. Imagine what we could do with that money. And yet, despite that level of spending, housing output has actually gone backwards. Let that sink in. More money going out the door, fewer homes coming out the other end. What made the hearing even more disturbing was the total lack of transparency around how this money is being spent. Now, senators asked for clarity around build costs, subsidies, and payments to private partners, and what they ran into was secrecy. Key documents were redacted, line-by-line figures were withheld, even reports commissioned with taxpayer money were kept hidden. So you've got Aussies being told, trust us, we're fixing housing, while the same Aussies are denied basic visibility into how tens of billions of dollars are being used. Remember, there was a huge scam in NDIS. Who's to say this is not any different? And when governments start hiding numbers instead of explaining them, it's usually because the numbers don't tell a story they want you to see. Which brings us to the next part that should worry every single taxpayer. Here's where the picture gets even uglier. We heard in the Senate that while the average cost to build a home in Australia is closer to $500,000, there are cases where this agency is spending around 1.3 million per home.
Spending, in some cases, $1.3 million of taxpayer funds on a single house. Now, the average cost to build a new house is about 500 grand. So the first question is, why are taxpayers funding massively gold-plated housing projects?
I want you to stop and think about that for a second. How many Aussies do you know who can afford to go out and get a 1.3 million home? Because that's the price point the government is operating at while claiming it's solving an affordability crisis. And it doesn't stop there. The agency has burned through tens of millions of dollars in consultants, despite this being the same government that loves to complain about consultant waste. At the same time, the organisation itself is bleeding starved. About a quarter of its workforce leaves every year, and most of its senior executives have already walked out. So you've got an agency that's unstable, hemorrhaging experience, outsourcing core decisions, and spending eye-watering sums per home, all while insisting it's the answer to Australia's housing crisis. That is not a solution. This is a warning sign. And then comes the policy that was supposed to help first-home buyers, but may end up hurting them the most. When you put all of this together, the Senate hearing wasn't just uncomfortable, it was damning. An agency spending tens of billions without clear outcomes, a government competing against its own citizens in the housing market, homes costing more than most Aussies could ever afford, consultants everywhere cashing in, documents redacted, answers deferred, and all of this while rents are exploding, house prices remain out of reach, mortgage repayments are higher, and households are already under enormous pressure. This is what happens when housing policy becomes about optics instead of outcomes. And that's why this inquiry matters, because at some point, someone has to ask the hard questions. Someone has to force transparency. Someone has to say, this is not working. Because if this continues, the damage won't just be political, it will be structural, and Aussies will be paying for it for decades. So here's the uncomfortable truth. The housing crisis isn't getting worse because Aussies aren't trying hard enough. It's getting worse because the system designed to fix it is failing at the most basic level. More money, fewer homes, higher prices, less transparency. That's not reform, that is mismanagement. The question now is simple. Who's going to hold the government accountable before the damage becomes permanent? Let me know what you think. Does this feel like a government fixing housing or a government completely up?
I'll tell you exactly what it is. I'll tell you exactly what it is. I'm going to watch this next one that he's got too. This is a transfer of not just wealth, like that kind of wealth, to transfer of property. They're buying these houses, putting them into Housing Australia, and filling them with immigrants. Now, believe me, Pauline Hanson will get in. She'll get the balance of power. And she will boot out a whole bunch of immigrants, just like America's done. But you know that what's going on in America has not done a damn thing to fix any of their economic issues or their housing issues. All the homeless people are still homeless people. Skid Row's still Skid Row. But geez, Israel's doing alright. They're all in on it. Every single one of them. So what are you going to do? You're going to go and rah-rah for Palestine? Grow up. If you ever wanted it, any better reason to use your brains and stay home and stop validating these pricks, there you have it. $80 billion with a B dollars worth of reason to not send them another cent. You own your houses, guys. You own them. They're yours. if you really want to process properly, imagine if everybody cancelled their housing rent payments. I'm just going to spend it on food. If everyone did it, they're not going to evict everyone for not paying their rent. Or if you just withheld it and hung on to it. So, no, yeah, we got the money. Yeah, you're not getting it though. Why not? Nothing gets fixed. Houses are dilapidated. We're paying the same rent as old mate 2 blocks away in a brand spanking new house. What's with that? It's supposed to be affordable housing. Shouldn't the rent be priced accordingly? Not just because it's got 3 bedrooms. It's cold. They're not heated appropriately. They're not designed for those things. They were designed for wood heaters. Do something to address this problem that's affordable, because I can tell you now I could heat this house a damn sight more less than what that thing costs if I had a wood heater. I could do it for about $500 a year. How? Well, here's a good idea. How about government stop sending all of our timber away as wood chips and let some local economy go by letting us have wood eaters back and let some people cut some bloody wood. That's a living in that. There's a house, there's a living for a family. And someone who's willing to go out and hang off a chainsaw and swing a blockbuster. Oh, excuse me. There's $80 billion worth of reasons to completely withdraw your consent from these pricks. Let's look at the next one. This bloke's pretty onto it. I'm definitely going to follow this guy. He's all over it like a rash.
The Australian economy is in absolute chaos at the moment. Every time Aussies look to the government for answers, all they see is finger pointing. Politicians blaming each other, and when that runs out, they start blaming us, Aussies. That's what we have become.
My comments yesterday, I do need to correct the record. My comments should have said the Morrison government, not the Howard government.
Order. We're just 6 minutes or so into question time, and the disrespect in this chamber is unacceptable.
Hey guys, Scott here, and I need you to understand this because what just happened over the last week is not normal. In the space of just a few days, the RBA did something extraordinary. They came out in public and alluded to what senior economists have been quietly whispering for months. This is big. They said that the economic uncertainty we're living through and the rate pain Aussies are feeling right now is not random. It has a culprit, and the current government is being blamed for it, with the RBA effectively backing that up. That's a huge moment, because just days earlier, Treasurer Jim Chalmers was out there saying everything was on track. He was downplaying the problem, saying inflation wasn't the government's issue, acting like nothing had gone wrong. He even went a step further and blamed Aussie households, saying people spend too much, lived too hard, and now they need to wear the higher repayments because of it. Then the RBA walks into a public hearing and calmly, mathematically contradicts him. So what happens next? Jim Chalmers
What happens next? Well, I know what the plan is. Are you going to fall for it? You see, now, at this point, Pauline can't lose. Because she sure as hell can't win. the whole voting structure isn't set up that way. What do? They all throw themselves under the bus and get their gold watch and their retirement salary, cushy job somewhere in Davos. Oh yeah. And the condominium on the Gaza Strip. What do you think? We get the rat bags and they get the Gaza Strip.
Freaks out and pivots. Instead of taking responsibility, suddenly we're talking about overhauling the Australian tax system. Raising taxes on everything. Electricity, fuel, alcohol, and essentials. And if CGT and negative gearing get touched, you already know what comes next. Higher rents, more pressure on households, more pain laid on top of the pain. And the crazy part is, all of this has unfolded in one single week. At this point, it generally feels like a reality TV show. If there was a series on how this government is handling the Aussie economy, it would make the Kardashians look sane. And while all of this is playing out, the big four banks are watching it in real time. Just hours ago, they flipped their forecast for 2026, completely reversed course, because they're looking at this and thinking one thing: this isn't getting fixed quickly. Aussies are being locked into a longer stretch of uncertainty and rate pain. And here's the real problem. Every single one of these developments is being reported in isolation, like they're unrelated, like they're not part of the same story. No one is putting all of these pieces together. So in this video today, that's exactly what I'm going to do for you. So I'm going to put it all together. We're going to look at what the RBA actually said, what Jim Chalmers has been claiming, why taxes are suddenly everywhere, why the banks just flipped, and what all of this means for Aussie households heading into 2026, what this means for you. Because you have the right to know what's coming. You have the right to know what this means for your money, your repayments, and your future. And if you want daily updates on property and the economy, hit the subscribe button. Okay, let's get into it. So just last week, the RBA lifted interest rates by 0.25%, taking the cash rate up to 3.85%. That was the first hike in more than 2 years, and it immediately made life harder for a lot of households. The big four banks moved fast. Westpac went first, then CBA, NAB, and ANZ followed. Every one of them passed the hike straight onto mortgage holders. For an average borrower, that's roughly an extra $100 a month in repayments. What makes this worse is the timing. This year was meant to be about a bit of relief. Instead, people are already dealing with higher rents, expensive groceries, energy bills are absolutely through the roof, and house prices refuse to cool. Rates going up again was the last thing anyone needed. And the RBA didn't exactly calm things down with this outlook. Inflation isn't expected to get back into the 2 to 3% target range until around mid-2027. And core inflation is expected to sit higher for even longer. That tells you this pressure isn't going away quickly. So when people say it feels like there's no breathing room, that's why. Relief keeps getting pushed further down the road. Straight after the rate hike, Treasurer Jim Chalmers fronted the media and said something that raised a lot of eyebrows. He pointed to the RBA's written statement, the one they release every time they announce a rate decision, and said, look at this, the RBA didn't even mention government spending. He really should not have said that. He said, this isn't on us, this isn't on the government. Inflation pressure is coming from private demand. And when politicians say private demand, what they really mean is you and I, Aussie households. He repeated that message again and again in interviews that day. Government spending is fine, the pressure is coming from people spending too much, and now because of that, households need to adjust to higher repayments. But the problem is, the story completely falls apart the moment you look at the data. Private demand in Australia has actually been pretty weak. Households have already been pulling back, people aren't splurging, they're cutting subscriptions, delaying purchases, and just trying to get through the week. Public spending and public demand, on the other hand, exploded. Outside of the COVID years, when emergency spending actually made sense, government spending is now sitting near the highest levels it has been in decades as a share of our GDP. Treasury's own forecasts show spending heading towards around 27% of GDP in 2025 to 2026 in an economy that is already stretched. That is an enormous number. Also, ask yourself this: where is that money coming from? It's not coming from booming tax revenue or productivity growth. It's coming from borrowing. They are spending money they do not have. We are living in a budget deficit. And when you flood an economy with demand without fixing supply, prices go up. That's basic economics.
The problem in Australia, as per this chart, is that public spending, after many, many years of very, very strong growth, is running at record levels as a share of the economy. And that was okay when private demand was low. But then when private demand started to pick up, government demand was in the way, and of course we've ended up with this pickup in inflation.
Inflation was not random, it was manufactured. Some might even say it was planned. And this is where I generally don't understand what the Treasurer was thinking. Did he not read the numbers? Or did he read them, realise how bad it looked, and decide to blame Aussies anyway? This is where things really blew up. A couple of days later, RBA Governor Michelle Bullock appeared before a parliamentary committee. She was asked directly whether government spending contributes to inflation and interest rate decisions. Chalmers must have heard that and must have been panicking. She made it abundantly clear that government spending absolutely led to inflation being out of control, especially when it comes through rebates, transfers, and programs that put cash straight into people's hands. In other words, she publicly contradicted the idea that households alone are to blame. And that moment mattered because it exposed the lie at the heart of the Treasurer's argument. So now you've got the Treasurer blaming households, the RBA explaining the maths, and the government suddenly under a microscope. And instead of taking responsibility, what actually happened next? They pivot. Suddenly the conversation shifts to tax reform. Suddenly everything is on the table. Capital gains, negative gearing, fuel excise, taxes on alcohol, taxes on tobacco, taxes on electricity, essentials. If they could tax the air you breathe, they probably would. Because when you blow out spending and the bill comes due, you have two options: cut spending or raise revenue. And cutting spending is politically painful. So they're going to go after the revenue. Okay, so let's zoom out, because this is where everything connects. The big four banks care about risk, and what they've been watching over the last week is a government blaming households, a central bank quietly pushing back, inflation staying higher for longer, and no clear plan to fix the underlying problem. So they did what banks do. CBA, Westpac, and NAB all changed their forecasts. Only a month ago, most banks thought February would be the last hike. Now the majority expect another 25 basis point hike in May, taking the cash rate up to around 4.1%. That is a massive flip in a very short space of time. Markets followed. Odds of a May hike jumped fast, and all four banks passed the February hike straight onto borrowers without hesitation. That tells you something incredibly important. The banks do not believe this is getting fixed quickly. They see a long grind ahead, not a quick reset. Think of it this way: the RBA doesn't want to be blamed for taking rates down too quick. The government doesn't want to be blamed for all of their spending. So now they are actually fighting amongst each other. And here's what really worries me here. All of this internal chaos, this misalignment, is happening while the global environment is already unstable. Geopolitical tensions are rising, trade relationships are shifting, big economies are repositioning. Australia should be in a strong, stable position right now. We should be tightening the ship, building buffers, and preparing for external shocks. Instead,
hang on, go back a bit. Who knows who that is? Anybody know who that is? Who is that? Who that? Anybody know who is that? That's Japan. That's, what is it? President, Prime Minister, bloody whatever you want to call it. Chancellor, the Emperor, the Empress, Empress of Japan. And Japan want to bring 10 corporations to Australia. Keep that in the back of your mind. Australia wants to bring 10 Japanese corporations into the country, based around minerals, resources, infrastructure, artificial intelligence, data research. They want to mine the shit out of us. They want all of our stuff. They want to mine the shit out of us. And they're going to use the United States of Israel to do it. They're trying their best to provoke the BRICS nations to come out and fight. By starting a fight with China over the Port of Darwin, bam, suddenly we become a proxy war zone just like Ukraine. How long have I been saying this? How long have I been saying it, people? This is so important. This is probably the most important bit of information you'll probably ever get out of me. I don't know.
Relationships are shifting. Big economies are repositioning. Australia should be in a strong, stable position right now. We should be tightening the ship, building buffers and preparing for external shocks. Instead, we are internally unstable. We've got inflation still too high, rates rising again, households under pressure, a government scrambling for revenue, and policy uncertainty everywhere you look. That is not a good setup for what comes next. Okay, so let's wrap all of this up. Rates are now at 3.85%. The banks passed the hike straight on, and the RBA governor has made it clear that government spending does in fact play a role in keeping demand high. At the same time, 3 of the big 4 banks now think another hike in May is very possible, taking rates to around 4.1%, because inflation is still sitting well above target and isn't expected to come down quickly. The real issue here is trust. Aussies are being told different stories while their bills keep rising and their breathing room keeps shrinking. So I do want to hear from you. Do you think we're headed for another rate hike this year? Or do you think May is where the RBA finally pauses? And do you think Aussies are being told the full truth about what's driving all of this chaos? Or are we just being managed until the next budget? Drop your view in the comments. I read them.
And that's right. The tax has just doubled. It's gonna happen again and again. Why? The interest rate hike. You see, the interest rate hike doesn't just affect the interest on your new cruiser that fully flexes with a big lift kit. It doesn't just affect your first home buyer's mortgage or your same day loan settling or whatever. Alright? Excuse me. Or your finance or your afterpay. It doesn't just affect all that. Pretty. Yeah, no, I'm a pervert. I just noticed she's pretty. It's odd for around here. Most people are getting around with their antenna up. It's good to see someone that takes care of himself. That's what I mean. Now, it doesn't just affect that. Right? The banks have to pay interest. If the banks have to pay interest, the government has to pay interest on the loans that it makes through the Reserve Bank of Australia, who borrows money from the International Monetary Fund via printing through the Franklin Mint. If we're not careful, our entire social security system is going to collapse. They got money for a football stadium here in Tassie, but they don't have enough beds at the hospital, and we got this shit going on. That's just one thing, just one little single thing. Spending all this money on a football stadium, they don't have enough beds at the hospital. They're always booting people out in the middle of the night because they've got no bed for them, and they shouldn't be. Someone got sent home here a little while ago, waiting for results. Before his results were back, he died at home. It's unacceptable. We've got newspapers printing lies. We've got Marinus that's going to rob us raw. We're going to be paying more for energy with infrastructure that we own. I got told nothing but lies by Marinus the other day, and I tripped him over I don't know how many times, and he thinks no, you didn't, mate. No, you didn't. By repeating the same lie over and over doesn't make it true. That's why I walked out on you. You're a goose and a liar. Marinus are going, I'm telling you now, they're going to be the power source that taps the big petroleum basin in the Bass Strait. I'm telling you now, because you reckon he didn't know it was there, but then gave me his word that that's not going to happen. How can he speak for a board of directors? He can't. He's just a representative there to sell us the brochure. So that's the plan. That's a plan, plus the whole data farming bullshit. Which Pauline Hanson is right on board with, by the way, because she's too stupid to realise that we don't want chicken salt with that. Right? We don't want sauce and chicken salt with our fish and chips, and I sure as hell don't want my steak cooked in a sandwich press. Now, mass expulsion of the system, just mass exodus from the system. If you've got a court thing to go to, fine, go to court. Just let it eat itself up. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. It's going to eat itself up. It's all going to eat itself to pieces. We cannot trust a single one of these people. Not one. The Governor-General won't do a job. So we have to make it insolvent. If we're not paying taxes, they can't borrow money. If they can't borrow money, they'll sook real quick. And then we sack the Governor-General, which is supposed to be their boss. If we sack the boss, we sack everyone. Get out. No, we don't need your permission to sack you. Get out. Right, but we do it from home. Help one another out. Strike with purpose. Do nothing with purpose and with absolute conviction. Stop going to these protests. It's just fueling it. All that shit's going on. All you people that are going to protests and hopping up and down about Israel and Palestine, right, haven't got a clue that this is happening. Not a clue. Wake up, McFly.